Hello everybody and welcome to my 5th video update. So I've been here in Taiwan for about a month now and it really has been an excellent experience. From what I've observed, Taiwan seems to have a separate feel from both North America and Europe, so that's been really cool to see. During my month here, I spent most of my time staying in Kaohsiung, which is a city on the south part of the island. I've also made some trips to nearby cities such as Tainan or Taichung, and I was also able to make a trip to the east coast for a few days. While here, I've been able to get out on lots of hikes, which is really nice. I've been able to really explore some of the bigger cities, and I've also been able to meet a bunch of people my age, which has been really great as well. I feel that in my time here, I have actually learned a decent amount about my questions as well, so I'm excited to share. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the 5 questions. Alright, so question number 1, is a gap year worth it? So I'll start by speaking some from personal experience here. This month away in Taiwan has definitely been quite valuable for me. I think coming to Taiwan, despite it being a bit of a more difficult travel destination, I have actually found it to be a little bit easier than Europe. I think this is mostly due to the fact that a lot of the confidence and the skills that I was able to build in Europe have translated pretty well over here to my time in Taiwan. That being said, there are certainly some things in the last month that have challenged me. I think probably the most difficult has been the intense language barrier, which I have had to find some pretty creative ways to get around at times. One thing I was also kind of thinking about in these past few days, and I think this is true about my time in Europe as well, is that I think after coming to these places, I will have a much easier time relating to foreigners back in Canada. I think that having had the chance to get to know the culture here will allow me to kind of better understand what maybe immigrants from Asia and Canada are going through as they adjust to Canadian life. I also definitely feel like because of my time traveling to these places, I'm going to be a lot more enthusiastic about getting to know international students in whatever university that I go to, definitely more so than if I had just gone straight to university, so I think that's a positive thing as well. I would now like to introduce the people that I interviewed for this video. So their names are David and Ruth, and they are my hosts here in Taiwan. They are Christian missionaries who moved here to Taiwan, I think over 30 years ago. I also love that Ruth was able to bring up the co-op program as something that may be valuable in similar ways as a gap year.
I think another option, a little different, is to be involved in co-op when you go to university, because then you get to see other places, different kinds of jobs that might relate to what you're studying.
Yeah.
2 of our kids did the co-op program. I think for arts degree people, co-op is really valuable because he graduated and he actually continued working for the company that he'd done his co-op for. And otherwise, I remember him saying,
kind of hard to find a job.
Without co-op, where would I be, kind of thing. And graduating with a degree in creative writing and political science.
Yeah.
And so co-op really sort of brought his interest down to something solid.
As someone who's hoping to get an arts degree, hearing about the co-op program is something that really sounds promising to me actually. And I think it will definitely be something that I will highly consider joining if I can. Now moving on to question number 2, what is the purpose of higher education? It also sounds like since people work so hard to get into university here, they become pretty burned out by the time that they actually get there, which probably isn't the best.
University here, it's really hard. It used to be really hard to get in, but everyone said once you got in, you didn't have to work so hard.
Oh, really?
We have friends here who are both university professors, and they actually really complain about the quality of students in their school.
Well, there's different tiers of universities as well.
Yeah, but they basically say that once people get into university, they seem to think they don't have to work so hard anymore. They kind of feel like they've been slaving for years to pass the exams to get in, and once they get in, it's like, oh, I'm in now. Now I can relax a little more.
David also talked a little bit about how he's come to appreciate a liberal arts education more over time.
I think now that I've been out of school for a long time, I have a greater appreciation for more liberal arts kind of education. I just think that, to have a well-functioning society, you need to have people who can really think about issues well,
yeah,
and express themselves in debate and discussion and so on. And that generally comes from a more liberal arts kind of education.
Hearing David and also other people I've interviewed talk about how they have kind of come to value a liberal arts education has definitely helped me to kind of better understand the importance of being an educated citizen, whether that education comes from university or from other sources. Now moving on to question number 3, what can travel teach about careers? I think David brought up a good point related to this question about how jobs can also provide ways to gain life experience and to travel.
Yeah, I think jobs are a great way to get experience, just general life experience. And when I was in university, I actually had a couple of summer jobs that involved travel. I worked with a land surveyor and we traveled a bit around northern BC, and I worked tree planting where we traveled around northern BC and into Alberta. After university, I got a job working with a trading company, and I ended up going to China 3 times, and that was a huge eye-opener and a really good experience, which is partially why we ended up coming to Taiwan, because of that exposure to Chinese culture and so on.
Another thing that David and Ruth brought up is that employees in Taiwan tend to be very loyal to their company and also tend to have more of a group mindset.
There's often an expectation here to do overtime, and you don't necessarily get paid for it, which is quite different, you know, but it's, yeah, we have a job to do and you've got to step up for the company.
Sometimes we used to see in the past, just driving down the street, and you'd see all the employees of a company out all standing together in front of the shop doing exercises. They all, the whole staff come out in the morning and they're all doing their calisthenics.
Yeah.
And you know, so this kind of, this sort of group mindset, yeah.
I think it's probably a pretty positive thing that people are willing to make some personal sacrifices to see the company be successful. But it can be, I mean, it's like a lot of things, it can be a double-edged sword, you know. If you're having to do all this overtime, you're not getting paid for it, and it's taking time away from your family, and you're getting really tired and run down, it's going to affect your productivity in the long term.
Now on to question number 4, is the Canadian lifestyle an illusion? One of the biggest differences I've noticed between life here in Taiwan and Canada is its density and busyness.
When we go home, the first thing we notice is how empty the streets are.
Yeah, that's...
It's like
I noticed that as well, actually.
we feel like, where are all the people?
It's a ghost city.
You know, especially if you're in the suburbs and people have a garage. You know, they drive home from work, they drive their car into the garage, and the door goes down, and obviously they get out of their car in the garage and go into their house. You don't even see them. You know, whereas here, the houses are much more, they're close together, they're more like townhouse style. The houses are built right up to the street. Most people will ride scooters to get around locally, or just walk to the local store. People will sit outside their houses. You just see people. You see people outside. You have a lot more natural contact with your neighbors. Well, I think it's a positive. I like, you know, I'm a fairly social person, and I like having people around and seeing people. And
there's a Chinese word, renao, which means kind of noisy and busy and crowded, and it's a good thing.
But in a positive sense.
Yeah.
Even though David finds this to be a positive thing, I have questioned whether I would really enjoy living in Taiwan so much. I have definitely loved visiting here and being able to witness the busyness and the personality of the streets. However, due to my more introverted personality, I wonder if I spend a longer amount of time here, whether it would maybe kind of bother me that it's a little bit harder to find peace and quiet as it is in Canada. One thing I think Canada could learn from Taiwan is its sense of community. Although I think certain places are better than others in Canada for this, in general, I feel that most parts of Canada feel pretty dull. Canada is at a disadvantage because of its population density, but I think with some effort, this is something that could change. And I hope that I personally will remember what I saw here and make more of an effort to build community in the future of my life.
And we had a couple from Abbotsford actually come in and teach for a few years, and they lived in that building. And she told me she thought it very refreshing, because she said back home she had the sense of keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing, like everyone's seeing what everybody else has. And she said here we all live in the same building, we all have the same salary, and no one's worried about their house. The houses are all the same. And
well, that was Morrison, yeah.
Yeah, but she felt this sort of freedom, like freedom from this competition to keep up with your neighbor sort of thing.
I really love this story that Ruth told, and I have definitely found it to be true as well. Although having money and expensive things can be nice, I think having a good community and a good culture to surround yourself in is even better. This really seems to be how it is in Taiwan, since most people here have smaller apartments. However, there honestly is a general feeling of happiness and joy in the air that I've noticed in most places here. Now moving on to the final question, what is the meaning of life? Taiwan is pretty interesting in the way that there are several different religions here.
I guess you could say there's a lot of different religions in Taiwan. The predominant one we would just call Taiwanese folk religion, which is kind of a mixture of Taoist religion and some Buddhism and Confucian philosophy all mixed together. Mainly Taoist, where they believe in many different gods, and different gods have control over different things. I don't know how much meaning that gives to people. We have a lady in our church who was very into the traditional religion before she became a Christian. And she basically says, you know, I was just lost. I just did all this stuff. I worshipped all these idols because I didn't know anything else. And I felt like I needed help, but the more I worshiped them, the less peace I had, you know. And when some Christians cared for her and shared the gospel with her, she said, oh, this is what I need. We've met Buddhists here who are more kind of pure Buddhists, I guess you could say, who don't follow so much of the folk religion, but read the Buddhist sutras and meditate and so on. And they would probably say that they've found meaning in life through that.
As I explore and learn about other religions and worldviews, I still think that Christianity is probably the one that is most in line with my personal values, at least as of right now. I do, however, recognize that hearing about these other religions from people like David and Ruth is quite biased, so I definitely don't want to stop my search for information about Buddhism and other religions.
We knew a lady who was actually quite high up in a Buddhist organization, and to make a very long story short, she started coming to our church, and it took about 10 years of contact with Christians, but now she's a Christian. She said to me once, she said, you know, this is long before she became a Christian. She said, you know, you Christians and us Buddhists, we're really similar. And I said, oh, really? How's that? I was really surprised at what she said. And she said, well, you know, you guys pray, you pray to Jesus, and we pray to our gods like Kuan Yin and Mazo. You pray and we pray. I said, okay. She said, you know, you guys sing, you've got these songs that you sing, and we have songs too. We sing and we chant and so on. I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. She said, you read the Bible, you read your holy book, and we have our holy books, we read our holy books.
Yeah.
And, okay, that's interesting. But then she stopped and she said, but there's one thing that's different. She said, you guys really love each other. She said, when we have our Buddhist meetings, we're just there for us. I just go to the Buddhist meeting for me, for what I can get out of it.
It's selfish goals.
But she said, when you guys have your church service, you know, people really, you care about each other.
This story about how Buddhism is more selfish than Christianity also really interests me. As I thought about this, I was originally kind of thinking that, you know, maybe Christianity is also selfish in some ways, because as a Christian you're kind of following a certain set of values so that you can one day hopefully go to heaven. But then I kind of realized that you could probably say a similar thing about really following any set of values. So I'll have to think about it a little more, but regardless, it was pretty interesting to hear this story, and I'll definitely be curious to investigate selfishness within Buddhism or other religions or worldviews in the future. I also found it interesting what David had to say about why he and Ruth chose to become missionaries.
I remember talking to a lady once, and she was kind of saying, well, why are you even here? You know, we have our own religion. And I said, you know, I'm here because I want people to know there's a choice. I said, you know, if you try a new kind of food, I said, for example, somebody gives you a certain kind of ice cream, and you try that ice cream and you think, wow, this ice cream is so delicious. Are you just going to keep that to yourself? Or are you going to introduce your friends to it and say, hey, I just had something that I never had before. It's really, really great. You've got to try this.
For me, the concept of evangelism and becoming a missionary is something that I have questioned in the past. I guess I just kind of wonder whether it's always such a good thing to share Christianity with someone who maybe has found legitimate peace and meaning in their life through some other method. This does, of course, depend on the situation, though, and I really quite liked hearing David's perspective on this and about his motivation for becoming a missionary. Alright, so that's going to be it for this one. Thank you for watching my 5th video update. As I've said, Taiwan has honestly been amazing, and I'm tempted to say that this last month of travel has probably been my favorite yet. So make sure to stay tuned for my next video. I'm hoping to do one more video about Taiwan before continuing on to Japan. Thanks again for everyone's support, and goodbye until next time.